Hi everyone, and welcome to Social Media 101, Introduction to Social Media for Cultural Organisations. This webinar is the first in Museums and Galleries of New South Wales' Let's Get Digital series, covering a broad range of online and digital topics and skills. My name is Dale Maxwell-Smith, and I'm the Training and Engagement Manager at Museums and Galleries of New South Wales. I'm a fair-skinned woman in my 30s with blonde dyed mid-length hair with dark roots at the moment due to lockdown. And I have blue eyes. I'm wearing a red jacket today and I'm seated in front of an olive curtain. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am coming to you from the unceded lands of the Darug and Gundungurra people. I would also like to acknowledge all the other traditional custodians of the lands on which we are all gathered on today, right across New South Wales and Australia, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome also to any First Nations peoples joining us in the audience today. We're joined today by the wonderful Vanessa Low, who some of you may know from her time as the Communications Coordinator at Museums and Galleries of New South Wales, and who will be sharing some useful and inspiring social media insights with us in her presentation today. Before we launch into the main presentation though, I just wanted to take this moment to draw everyone's attention to a couple of things. At the bottom of your screens, there's two ways to get in contact with us. One of those is the chat function, and if you click on that, you'll be able to type in. Use that function for if you want to let us know who you are and where you're coming from, or also if you're having technical difficulties and I can try and help you out. The other way is the Q&A option, and that is for questions. So we'd love you to let us know any questions that you have for Vanessa. We will be addressing as many questions as we can in the at the end of the presentation, and then we will be able to go through any others that we don't get time for, hopefully on our website. So if you're like me and you forget your question at the end, you can put that in at any time during the presentation, and then we will get to those at the end. We are recording this session and we plan to make it available as a resource on our website afterwards. So I'd also like to thank Create New South Wales for their support of the Let's Get Digital project. And there's more information on that as well as our other upcoming workshops and webinars on our website. Now, just before I hand over to Vanessa to begin, I just want to do a quick poll. I don't know about you guys, but it feels a little bit strange, everyone being in their own bubbles at the moment. And I'm just going to launch a little poll that's just going to ask you whereabouts you're coming from and what kind of organisation you're with. And I'll just give you 2 minutes to do that. Okay, great. And that's 2 minutes, and I will share those answers with everyone at the end. And so with that, I will hand over to Vanessa. Thanks, Vanessa. And I can't wait to hear what you've got for us.
Thanks, Dale. Okay, so I'm just going to start with sharing my screen so we can all see this. Okay, Dale, does this look right? I think so. Thank you for sharing where you're from. It was really nice to see lots of familiar faces or names, and also some new ones. And I can see we have 90 participants, which makes me a little nervous, but I hope we all learned something new today. So as Dale mentioned, my name is Vanessa, and I might have spoken to you previously as the Communications Coordinator at M&G New South Wales. And so I'm very excited to be talking about social media today, which is one of my passions. And I am talking to you from the beautiful Gadigal country in Sydney. Today is about giving you an overview of social media and how you can utilise it for your organisation. I'll be covering a lot of information, and I just want to acknowledge that it can feel a bit overwhelming, but by no means should you feel pressure to go out and do all these actions. You are the experts on your museums, your collections, or your gallery and your spaces, your artists and your communities. So you are the ones who are best positioned to take from this presentation what is most appropriate and what could best suit your particular position. Before I get started, I know we've all been spending a lot of time behind computer screens. So I thought before I start each section, I might just give you the opportunity to take a big breath in and out and shake your bodies back. Now, I can't see anyone, so I hope you're all doing this with me and not just watching me do it. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit more about me. So who am I and why am I the one telling you about social media? So my background is in art theory and graphic design, and I've previously worked at the Australian Museum, Museums and Galleries of New South Wales, and I'm now working as a digital content creator in the marketing agency Heads and Tails, which means I'm doing social media for brands and helping them tell their stories online. But a lot of my background is in galleries and museums, collections, archives, research, programs, education, and digitization. So on screen, you can see me here on the left talking about an exhibition at the Australian Museum. And on the right are some digital assets I created for the Sydney Morning Herald last year. So my skill set is quite broad, but I've created this Venn diagram here. So this is kind of who I am: art and design, museums and galleries, and communications. And that's me as an illustration, because I know we're all visual learners in the art sector. So what we're going to cover today is, what is social media and why should you use it? 2, we're going to cover the key social media platforms, then choosing the right platform or platforms for your museum. As I mentioned, there's a lot, so we really want to take some time to choose what is the best fit for us. Then we'll talk about content ideas, practical considerations for running your social media, case studies, and your next steps. So, as I said before, we're starting a new section, so take a deep breath in and out and have a bit of a shake, and we're focused. So what is social media and why should you bother using it? In the arts, we're all working really hard. Social media can seem like an additional task or another thing I have to add to my plate, but I want to give some insights as to why you should really put the time aside and give it a go. So firstly, social media is the electronic communication through which users create and share online content such as information, ideas, or personal messages intended for others. The key parts of this is that we're creating something online and it's intended for an audience, which is distinctly different to if I, say, just wrote in my diary at home for no one but myself to see. Social media has an audience in mind. And that can apply to so many things. So when we talk about social media, it can feel overwhelming because it could be anything from an online community, families and friends staying in touch long distance, sharing a portfolio of work, businesses searching for customers, entertainment, dating websites, marketing campaigns, live streaming, professional networking, information campaigns such as public health, all of these things, but we're just going to focus on museums enhancing their relationship with existing visitors and attracting new audiences. And why should you use social media? I've taken this quote from Investopedia because I think they've said it the best. Social media is important because it allows you to reach, nurture, and engage with your target audience no matter their location. When a business can use social media to connect with its audience, it can use social media to generate brand awareness, leads, sales, and revenue. And a little bit more, so don't just take my word for it. I've got some statistics too. So Australia has 20.5 million social media users, and of those people, they're using it for an average of 1 hour and 46 minutes every single day. In 2020, the 2 most downloaded mobile apps in Australia were Zoom and TikTok, and the total investment in social media advertising in Australia is approximately $2.5 billion. And 1 in 3 Australians use social media to gather information about brands they're considering. For example, if you go to the supermarket and you've never seen something before, but compared to another brand that maybe you've seen online. We go to social media to check out information and do our research. It's not just about being entertained and socializing with friends. We're now looking there to gather information. And my second stat on the right-hand side is about how much people are using it in metro areas or regional and rural areas. And we can see that most people are using it at least 1 to 4 times a day, if not more. So that's huge. And 2 other things to consider is that social media is free to use, which means it's accessible. So whether you're working at a large organization or a small volunteer-run organization, these platforms are all accessible to you. So they're free to use and low cost to run. All of these create a pretty compelling argument for why we should be using social media. I want to translate those things now into a museum or gallery context. So social media can help us increase our reach. And by reach, I mean the people who are aware of your museum, your collection, your volunteers, and your stories. If you think of only getting traffic from people walking past, that's a really small pool of people. Whereas if you think I can reach, say, people who are interested and walk past in person in the close community, plus additional audiences, people who are interested in history or specific things you have in your collection, or people who are just curious but say live in another country, you now have access to all these additional audiences and additional reach. The second thing is nurture, especially when you already have an existing group or audience or visitors. How can you nurture them to make them more invested and more interested in your museum or gallery? How can you pique their interest and make them want to return over and over again because they are as passionate about your collection and your stories as you are? The next thing is engage. Engagement doesn't just mean someone walks into your museum or gallery, has a look around, thinks that was a nice time and leaves. Engagement is also about people feeling like they can come in, can they join a program, can they talk to your staff, can they ask to use your library, can they be more invested and react online, can they comment, do they feel like they're also a part of your story and also an active part of your community? Then there's brand awareness, similar to reach. So brand awareness is, are you targeting people in your community who've never heard about you before? Perhaps there's someone who comes all the time, you know, they're very aware of your brand. But if I'm someone who's only heard of your museum gallery once or twice and I can't really remember where it is or what the opening hours are, that's one thing. How can you make people more aware that you know, maybe they've only visited once, but they saw a post online and so you have great programs in the school holidays, or they saw something you shared on Facebook that you had a specific exhibition coming up. How can we get people educated so they know what to expect and can be excited about coming and know what you are associated with, the kinds of artists, the kinds of exhibitions, and the kind of experience they can expect. And the last thing is important too, it's sales and revenue. So most museums or galleries will have to have some kind of income, whether that's from visitation, programs, merchandise, publications you might self-publish. Social media can also help promote those things too, which is really important when you're running your business and want to keep the lights on and pay your staff. So all really important things. Okay. The rule of 7, I'm not sure if anyone has heard of this before, but this is a very common term in marketing. It refers to the fact that it takes an average of 7 interactions with your brand before a purchase will take place. And the same thing can be said about museums and galleries. If someone's never heard of you before and you've got word of mouth, so maybe a few friends mention it, okay, you kind of heard about it before. But if a few friends mention it, you see a great post on Facebook, you may read an article in local newspaper, and then you can also see there's a program or an Instagram live happening. You will remember that name, and the next time it pops up, people will know, oh yeah, they're really active. They've got a lot of interesting things going on. You know what? I'm going to go there this weekend. Or, you know, we're in lockdown now, I can't go anywhere. I'm going to spend some time exploring their catalogue on their website or looking through their eHive and seeing what their collections offer. Okay, Next section is the key social media platforms. So new section, let's take a big breath in and out and just wiggle about so we're focused. I might just do a bit of a stretch. Okay, because this is a big section. There are so many social media platforms. I think I see a new one pop up every other week, and there's new names out there and I'm like, oh, should I try that one or that one or that one? And it can be really overwhelming. And I don't want anyone to feel like they have to do everything. But what I've done is I've focused down onto 6 platforms that I just briefly want to go through. So you're aware of what they do. Maybe you're already on top of one, but have never heard the other, or you already do a few, and this might just solidify that what you're doing is already the right fit for you. The social media platforms here I've divided into 2 sections. So the first section is key social media platforms for community. So this is Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and it's quite easy to remember because they're all blue and white, which I don't think was all on purpose, but anywho, I'm sure there's something to be said for that. And then key social media platforms for storytelling, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, which all have red and white in them too. Another interesting visual cue. I'm going to talk about the first section, so Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And these are really good for community engagement, community management, getting information out there. So let's start with Facebook. So Facebook was founded in 2004, and it's a website that enables people to connect with friends, colleagues, or like-minded groups through photos, videos, and messages. So in addition to having your own personal account, so this is completely separate, we're talking about Facebook pages and groups that you could have for your museum or gallery. And you can access it through the website or on your mobile phone or a tablet, and it's free. So there's so much I could say about Facebook, and if you do want to know more, we've got 2 more workshops coming up as part of the Let's Get Digital program, so keep an eye out if you want to sign up for those 2. Facebook has 2 things I want to talk about, a Facebook page and a Facebook group. So a page is publicly accessible and it's dedicated to your museum or gallery, and it's kind of like a mini website. This might be good for you if, say, you don't have the resources to set up your own separate website, or if you want to increase that brand awareness and make sure people know your updates in a medium that they're already on. A lot of people go on Facebook daily. So you can include your basic information such as address, your opening hours, telephone number, and photos, videos, text, and links. But in addition, you can also live stream. You can do appointments and bookings, which could be useful when we come out of lockdown. You can do job listings, stories. You can look into audience insights, paid advertising, reviews, fundraisers, and you can even sell products. So there's a lot going on. And a Facebook group is a public or closed group that can be used for connecting a niche interest group. So perhaps you have a really strong, dedicated group of people interested in local history. Facebook group could be a really nice way to bring those people together and to offer them opportunities to discuss topics and enrich that passion. When we're talking about engagement, this is another way to get people engaged when they can't physically go to your museum or gallery. I'm going to the next one now, which is Twitter. Twitter was founded in 2006, and it's a website or microblogging platform which enables people to publish short text, photos, videos, or links. And the key difference is that it's to a very wide audience. Twitter is a great way to engage with other people, and they could be all around the world. There's a big sense of community, and it's also very fast moving, which could also be a challenge too if you're looking at Twitter. So you can make a Twitter account for your museum and you can share short updates and interact with other accounts, and it's best for keeping up with that fast-paced news. The challenge could be that it's not exactly a hub where people would come to find your opening hours, But if they want to know your latest news, what you're doing, they want to see that you're getting involved with International Museum Day or Museum Selfie Day, this could be a great place to get involved. Twitter also allows you to reshare or reply or like other organizations' tweets too. And that could be a really nice way to be part of the museum community and feel involved with others, even though we're at home and in lockdown. Thirdly, I want to talk about LinkedIn, which has been around since 2003. And I know initially you might not think it's a social media platform, but in recent years, it's really become a hub of people talking about things they're passionate about related to their work and professional industries. And museums and galleries are definitely a part of that. So you can create a page for your museum and you can share photos, videos, polls, articles, and links. And it could be a good way for you to share some insights as well, or if your museum's running internships or has, opportunities that people can get involved in, it might be a great way to cross-promote and be part of that community as well. So kind of angling at different audiences here as well. And you can do International Museum Day or Museum Selfie Day here as well. Okay, we're moving on to now the more creative apps. These are still really important to share information that you would on others, like your opening times or, if you have to close for some reason. But there are a few more features in these next three apps that allow you to share video and photos in more creative ways. So Instagram was founded in 2010. It's primarily photos and videos, and it is mostly made for use on a mobile phone rather than a desktop computer. You can also use it on a tablet though, and it does have an integration with Facebook Business as well, because Facebook does own both of them, and it is free. Instagram content is best for showcasing image-rich content. Now, being in museums and galleries, there is often already image-rich content, working in the visual arts and having artworks or objects. These are things that often translate really well in a visual format, so in photos or in videos. You can also share short stories, and you can also connect with other accounts or museums or galleries. The challenge is that Instagram can be quite overwhelming because there is a lot of content. In addition to just pictures and videos, there's also IGTV, live streaming, reels, face filters, GIFs, messages, message groups, video calls. You can sell things now, and there's also analytics. So it can feel quite overwhelming, but my best quick tip for Instagram is to choose just a few aspects that you want to do well. As you can see on this right-hand side, when I was at M&G, we started putting up IGTV videos, kind of instigated from the pandemic last year. So sharing video content, even though we couldn't have our exhibitions in person, it was a way of keeping people still engaged and still interested. And it was very fortuitous because we also had a few interviews that were already existing that we could cross-publish onto the Instagram profile. So this could be an easy win for you if you've already got some videos, maybe talking to your staff members or interviews you've done in the past that you could easily upload here and start to get an IGTV presence going. Could be a good idea whilst in lockdown. The next one I want to talk about is YouTube. So YouTube was founded in 2005 and it's for video sharing, and it lends itself mostly to longer videos. The example I've got here is the Victoria and Albert Museum, which I suggest you all make a nice cup of tea and settle into and go through their videos because they're really, really interesting. Videos can be of, well, anything, and I've got a lot of content ideas to go through later. They could be simply filmed on your phone, or they could be digitized videos from your collection, or they could be more formal setups. It is best for medium to long form videos, but they can be hosted on YouTube and then embedded onto your website. So there's a nice way of cross promoting through there as well. And finally, I want to talk about TikTok, which might feel very new and I guess like uncharted territory. But I just wanted to mention it so that if you hear about it again or as it gains popularity, you know what's going on. And as I mentioned earlier, this was the second most downloaded app in Australia in 2020. So a lot of people are paying attention to it. So TikTok is primarily for videos, but unlike YouTube, the videos are usually up to 15 seconds, so really short and sharp. And TikTok is known for its highly specific algorithm. So based on what you're interested in, it will suggest niche videos. So you might think, oh, TikTok, I've heard it's a lot of teenagers dancing, which there definitely are, but there are a lot of museums doing really interesting things on TikTok and showcasing their collection of programs, which is really cool. And I'll give you a case study later. But if you want to have a look, or you can think of already a few things in your collection or a few staff members that you think, oh, I'm sure they'd love to tell a quick story, or there's something that we can show on camera that would look really fun, then TikTok might be for you. Okay, so in summary, those are the 6 main social media platforms that I'd recommend having a look at. And that's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. So on to our third section, which is choosing the right platform for your museum. And yes, before we start another section, let's just take a moment for a big stretch. Okay, that was a lot of information. So now you might be thinking, oh my goodness, I've written down all these apps and things. Don't feel too overwhelmed that you've got to do everything. Now we want to figure out how to choose what is best for us. Here are the things that I would consider. Firstly is time and people. Do you have 10 people who are super eager and ready to go and can't wait to go out and take pictures and write stories? Or do you realistically have 1 or 2 people who might be up for helping out every now and then? Have a real think about realistically who would like to be involved and the resources that you have. Next is audience. You are the experts on your audience. So if you know your community loves spending time on YouTube, they love deep dives and analysis, then that could be a good fit, YouTube. Or if you know, look, my audience is always on Instagram, like when people come to the museum, they're always asking, where's that thing I want to take a photo for Instagram, then that might be for you. So think about your audience and what they respond best to. The third thing is a goal. Is your goal to, pardon me, attract new visitors or show more behind the scenes or show longer videos that are interviews with your staff or artists? What is the goal and who do you want to speak to? The next one is technology. Now, I guess most people have a smartphone. It's pretty easy to film or take a photo of things, but is everyone up to use their phone, or do you need to have a separate computer? What is the actual technology? You know, we can all think, oh, I'd love to, film something that has all this beautiful lighting, etc. But if you don't have the camera and equipment to do it, it could be quite frustrating. So assess realistically, what technology do you have and what is able to be utilized? Can you rent something, or can that only be rented for a day? Or does someone have a camera, but they only volunteer on certain days? And the last thing I would consider is your collection. So you know your collection's best. What platform and medium do you think would suit it, or suit your collection and your objects in the best way possible? So you can choose a combination of platforms or features. Don't feel like you just have to use one, or don't feel like you have to use more than one. So you can decide based on these different elements. Next is content ideas. So again, just give a bit of a shake, and like, I know it can be quite overwhelming. I'm a little overwhelmed myself, and I wrote this, so I understand you might be feeling a little overwhelmed too. But with content ideas, what I'm going to go through now is a variety of different styles of posts that we did when I was at Museums and Galleries of New South Wales, to give you an idea of the different things you can share. For example, maybe you've already got a social media and you're really good at updating opening hours, with lockdown and changing rules and, having social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you've been really on it with sharing those updates. But is there a way you could now share what goes on behind the scenes or insights into your collection? Remember, we want our audience to feel invested in what we're doing. And we can do that by making them feel involved in the variety of activity that goes into creating the museum or gallery community and keeping things running. So here are some ideas. The first one is your museum or gallery building or location. Do people know how to find you? For example, if you're relying on people just walking past and coming off the street, just foot traffic on the weekend, do they even know what's inside the building? Do they know where the entrance is? This is a really nice thing you can share so people start to feel confident about visiting. If I've never visited, am I sure you have a ramp that's accessible for a pram, for example? Do I know if there's parking? Does it look like somewhere that's enjoyable to spend my weekend? And is there space out the front that my kids can run around, or we can have lunch, after we finish visiting? Is there a history of your building? Is there a fact about how it came to be a museum or gallery? Those are really interesting things that you can share. The next is staff or volunteer behind the scenes activities. What are you up to behind the scenes? Are you doing training, or are you setting up a working bee? Are you installing an exhibition? What happens when the museum or gallery is closed, like right now in lockdown? Is there anything that your staff are able to do from home? And what goes into making sure a collection is well taken care of? Next is students, interns, or researchers. Is there anyone coming to learn about your work or to assist you? And tell your community what they're doing. What is it that a researcher would want to come to your museum and look more into? Next is staff or volunteers in the museum. So when you're actually in the museum, what are they doing? Are they talking to visitors? Are they taking donations, cleaning, organising a display, or making sure there's hand sanitizer available? All these things can make your museum or gallery seem really approachable and let people know what to expect when they come. Next can be, of course, your exhibitions or displays. Is there a temporary display on? Can you tell people the closing date so they don't miss it? And what was the thinking behind the display? Can you give people more insights? And the next one is your collection. Is there a special object that has a really interesting history? Why should people come to see it? Or why isn't it not on display all the time? Can you ask volunteers to nominate their favourite collection object and to write a short explanation of why? And can you share that online? Or can you repurpose digitized images that you've already done and already have on hand? Next is staff or volunteer achievements or social occasions. Have you accomplished something together? What are you proud of? Is there a special occasion that you're celebrating, or even just a birthday or anniversary? What's it like to be part of your museum or gallery's community? The next is maintenance or infrastructure. This is really important. A lot of maintenance goes into keeping museums open to the public. What are you doing to make sure that your museum is up and running? Or have you got a grant that has allowed you to add something new? What can you share with the public? Next is programs. Are you involved with any programs such as M&G's standards? Can you share these activities and share what you're working on to upskill and improve your museum or gallery? Next is major events or concerns. Are you affected by local events such as bushfires? Can you let your community know to activate them? And you can even do things like call outs for help. And lastly is online activities. Whilst you're in lockdown, what are you doing? Can you share a webinar, or are you going to a meeting? Are you going to take a picture of this webinar right now? Take a screenshot if you're allowed to and share it. So there are a lot of things you can share online, and social media, how do I say, there's no one thing you can do. It's not that you have to do this or this. It's about showcasing and translating all those different parts of your museum or gallery community and work and staff and volunteers and collections, and giving insights to all of them online, so that if I've never heard of your museum or gallery before and I see something online, I think, oh, I want to learn more. I want to check that out. And that's where I'm going to go on my school holidays, or I'm going to read up more. It's all about motivating people and getting them interested in what you're doing. And here are some useful apps for creating or editing content for social media. So very simply, it could just be a phone taking a photo or video. But if you're feeling enthusiastic, I thought I'd put a few on this screen, including photo editing and design apps like VSCO and Snapseed, Canva, and then video editing, so iMovie, Splice, InShot. Most of these apps have free versions, so don't feel like you have to go out and get fancy software. It can be really simple. Also for organization or admin, websites like Later or Hootsuite can help you with scheduling. Linktree is useful for creating link in bios, and then Bitly and TinyURL are useful for shortening URLs, particularly for Twitter, which has a limit on how many characters you can share. Okay, practical considerations for running your social media. We're starting a new section, so let's digest that by taking a nice big breath in and out. Okay, so what do I mean by practical considerations? So you've got all this information and you're thinking about it, processing, but how are you actually going to make this happen? When you go and talk to your colleagues and say, I went to this workshop, what are you actually going to propose? Okay, firstly is roles and responsibilities. As you've picked up from here, there are a lot of things to think about with social media. It's not as simple as someone starting a Facebook and then popping up a post. They actually require quite a bit of planning and deliberation. So the roles and responsibilities I would consider is firstly, content creators. That is, are there people who are interested in taking photographs, or are there people who enjoy digitizing content, or is there someone who has access to previous images or files or stories that would be useful for social media? So you actually need to source the content and actually think of who can do that or who's enthusiastic. Next is publishers. So who will actually take the time to open up Facebook, find where the file is, create the caption, and then post it? That all does actually take a fair bit of time. It could be as short as, a couple minutes, or if you've taken time to put together a video, that might take, a little bit of extra time, because you might need to create a longer caption, check it's the right file size, check that it's uploaded correctly. So that does take a bit of time. And then there's moderators. Moderators are really important, because what we put up online, you are taking responsibility of sharing it. So if you're on Facebook, for example, and you're getting comments and inquiries, you want to make sure someone is there to respond. Maybe someone's inquiring about opening hours or a detail about a collection object you've shared. Who in your team is going to take the responsibility of checking in once every couple of days, or once a day, or once a week, depending on what you do, to check that there's no outstanding inquiries that need to be answered? Now, in some instances, like when I'm running social media, you could be doing all three, but that does take up quite a lot of time. And you might want to figure out, do we have certain people in certain roles, or is it a rotating schedule we have? You know, we try and get one person to come up with one idea per month. Just keep in mind that there is time and commitment for each of these, and it could be a lot of pressure if it's all on one person. Next is a content calendar or planner. This can be really simple, or it can be quite complex. But the simplest thing that you could do is create a calendar that has upcoming events, upcoming posts you want to do. Maybe you put in exhibition opening and closing dates. This is a way to just make sure that you are capturing important information that needs to be shared. That can be simply an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe you just have a physical calendar on the wall that you like to handwrite it in. Or you can get quite sophisticated, and people have special websites and platforms about posting at certain times of day. Once you are posting on Facebook for a while, you can actually see analytics of when people are looking at your posts, what days, what times, and you can schedule your posts, pardon me, around then. But simply, a content calendar is just making sure you have an overview of what's going on and what you might want to share online. So that could even be birthdays or special occasions, when you have training and you know people will all be together in one room, could be a really nice opportunity. Okay. Next is a style guide. So this is quite similar if you're thinking about, you might already have a style guide for captions in your museum or gallery exhibition space. It's pretty similar. You want to maintain consistency when you're creating things online as part of a museum or gallery organization. Is distinctly different to you just sharing things on your personal Instagram, for example. So you want to make sure there's a style guide and there's consistency, just the way you would do things if it was physically in your museum or gallery space. So a style guide could consist of just length of captions, for example. You might just want to make sure, you know, it's around 150 words or a bit less or a bit more, but give a ballpark number. And maybe you want to make sure everyone's writing in first or third person, such as my favorite collection object is, or Helen's favorite collection object is. That consistency is really important, especially if you've got a few different people working on the social media accounts. And lastly, you could create some consistency around the hashtags you use. For example, if you're a museum in the Blue Mountains, you might want to make sure that all your posts are using hashtag Blue Mountains or hashtag Mountains Made. This is a good way for you to be engaged in the community and for others to find you as well. Next is cultural sensitivities and online courtesies. Now, similar rules apply to when sharing content online as to when you're sharing content in a museum or gallery. So do remember that a social media account for an organization is different to a personal account. So anything you publish there is representative of the museum as a whole. And before you share a photo, you want to check with the people in it that they're okay with it being public, or you might want to just mention it to them when you're taking the photo that you're hoping to share it on social media. You might also want to check if a collection item contains information that belongs to someone, or it might have information in it that might offend people. Does it need a caption to go along with it that provides a bit more context to avoid misinterpretation? And does the content relate to any children, in which case you'd have to check with their parents. Next is risk assessment and management. So if you're planning to share something that could be interpreted as controversial or provocative, you might want to discuss a risk assessment with your team beforehand. It could be very simple as sitting down and having a conversation and seeing if anyone has flagged anything, or you might want to do a more thorough risk assessment, for which I can recommend this M&G New South Wales resource that goes into a bit more detail. Maybe you can analyse, how would this affect the reputation of the museum or gallery? Or can we share extra context beforehand to minimise misinterpretation? Or are we going to make sure that when we post this, we've got a moderator available who's going to check comments and messages a little more frequently around that time of posting? And is there a point in which you would remove the content entirely? Now, I'm not saying this will happen, but it's always good to have a little think about this beforehand, just the same way you would before putting something in your museum or your gallery space. Okay, I've just got a few case studies, and then we will be at the end and ready for Q&A. So if you've got a Q&A, now's a good time to pop it in the Q&A section. Okay, oh, and case studies, a new section. So take a nice moment to have a stretch and try and digest all that information. Or if you're writing notes, shake out your hands. Okay, I want to talk about TikTok because I know it's something that maybe a lot of you haven't heard of, but it's definitely something that's really booming for museums and galleries that are on there. And I want to give the example of Sacramento History Museum. Now, I just realized in my screenshot here, they've got 1.7 million followers, but I took that about a month ago and they've got 1.9 million followers now, which is pretty amazing. And they came to prominence after they shut their doors in 2020 due to COVID-19. And one of their staff suggested getting onto TikTok. And there's a good quote here from their CEO, which is, most of us in this meeting at the time thought, well, that's just for dancing and you're crazy. But they decided to give it a go and now they are very popular. And in particular, some of their volunteers have grown quite a following, such as this gentleman named Howard. And there's a great quote that says, Howard's fame has helped the museum ease back into normal life, and they're now getting plenty of visitors, and many of whom come in asking for Howard in particular. Howard shares stories and anecdotes about the collection, in particular about the printing press. So it's a good example of if you have someone in your museum or gallery who is passionate about collection objects or has a particular niche and interest, to start sharing that expertise and insight. People are interested and also want to know. Okay, moving on to Twitter. So another COVID-related example. So the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum shut its doors in COVID-19, and their security guard, Tim, was entrusted with posting updates to Twitter, considering he was the only person in the building. And Tim originally started with some very endearing posts that made it very apparent that he had not used Twitter before and didn't know how to use hashtags. And I guess the opposite of what I was saying previously, that it's good to have a style guide and think things through before you post. I guess Tim is an example of being very natural and just sharing things with a personal insight. And he became extremely popular. And now they have almost 300,000 followers. So that is definitely one to check out and have a good scroll through. And lastly, I'm going to point out the State Library of New South Wales's Instagram, and they've got over 21,000 followers. And their Instagram has a really good variety. Why I wanted to highlight them here is that they cover photos, archives, books, their building and facilities, programs, products from their store, and visitors. They really give a broad overview of the different aspects of their activity and their collection, and you get a good picture of how active they are and what they do and what goes into the behind the scenes of the library. And they're doing a really good job at keeping up these insights and content whilst people are at home. And I think that they've also got an at-home readers section for content type, which is showing people reading at home, which I think a lot of people would find very relatable right now. So next steps. That is so much information, and I know it can feel overwhelming, but I want to remind you that you shouldn't feel obliged to use every social media platform all at once. These are just tools that you can select and utilize when they're needed or when you feel that you have the time, energy to take on the next step. So my steps from here, it starts with just choosing one action. So if you're already a master at Facebook, your one action could be, all right, I'm going to try, can we set up a live stream? Can we utilize one of the tools that you haven't tried yet? Or if you've not got any social media presence, can you look at starting one of them? Maybe it's Instagram. And can you just choose one small action for Instagram? Maybe it's just sharing one photo a week or one video a fortnight. Nothing too hard. What works for you? Then I would suggest discussing and planning with your colleagues or your fellow volunteers. What do they think of it? Can you share the workload? How are you going to make this one step happen? Next is execute. Come up with a plan. We're going to try and do one extra post a week for the next 4 weeks. Give it a go. And then the last step is reflect. Did that work? Or did you try Facebook and it wasn't quite right? Or, I have a personal anecdote that I tried YouTube once a few years ago, tried making videos and realized it wasn't quite for me, but it was a really useful learning experience and it did teach me a lot. And now I know I've tried it and I've since used the skills that I learned from that experience to create videos on other platforms. So that is what I would suggest. So don't feel like you have to do absolutely everything, just choose one thing. And that leads me to my second final slide, which is links and more resources if you want to read more about any of those platforms. And also keep an eye out because we've got 2 more workshops coming up as part of the Let's Get Digital series. We've got Storytelling Online, Instagram and TikTok later this month, and Storytelling Online, Facebook and LinkedIn at the start of October. And I do hope you can join me for those. We'll be diving in a little bit more detail for those social media platforms and doing a bit more hands-on activities. Thank you so much. And I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I think we'll get on to Q&As.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for that. I think there's quite a lot going on in the chat saying that people really appreciated that. I know that I definitely got a lot out of it. I think it's really good sometimes to just go back to the basics and have a look at what you're trying to achieve and go from there, as we would in so many other areas. There's some great questions. I'm not sure we're going to get to them all, but we'll do our best.
Okay.
So first off, I wanted to, and you did kind of touch on this, but I wanted to ask you how important it is to have a curated or specific style for content. And I know you noted the style guide, but I guess I think what this question is trying to get at is in saying it can be difficult when you have multiple persons posting. What they're getting at too is there's a difference between the style and the content. And I guess how important is it that that's consistent?
Yes, that's a really great question because as social media has become more prominent, I guess more people are paying attention to what do you post? Does it match what is happening in your museum? Do the brand colors match? And I would say it is, I guess it depends how important it is to you. If you're working in a museum or gallery that has really consistent branding, I think it would be really smart to create a simple style guide, such as it could be as simple as, if you're sharing an Instagram story, just make sure you're using black text. It can be quite detailed, but there's also an argument for being quite casual and not needing everything to be perfect and stylized exactly the same. That's the beauty of social media. It moves much more quickly and it can be more casual. So by all means, if you do feel up to it, you can carry that style guide across, but it's not 100% necessary and it doesn't have to be done for absolutely everything.
Great, thanks. And I think this is a slightly different area, but I think it leads on quite nicely, is that We've got a question. Is it better to post infrequently or not at all until proper resources can be committed to building and maintaining a social media profile?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, so whether you should do it sporadically or not at all until you've got a plan going. I actually think for this one, I would personally lean towards doing it inconsistently until you get a plan. Because every time you do something, firstly, you are learning something. If you have a plan and then you come at it all gung ho, but then realize you have no experience in actually formatting something the right way and hitting publish, that might actually be quite tricky to do it all at once. But also, every time you just do one post, they stay on there. So it doesn't mean people are only looking at it at one time. It's good that if people come and say, for example, if you say, I can only really post once a month on Instagram. That might not seem a lot, but after doing it for 2 years, you have 24 posts, and anyone who comes to see it afterwards, they're all still there. They don't disappear, and they can just start to sow the seeds of your digital presence. So I would say if you can just do some here and there, that is still better than nothing, and will be a good learning experience, and start to grow your digital presence. Even if it's just a seed, it'll grow bigger.
Great, thanks. And I'm aware that I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm trying to keep a little bit of a stream going here with the questions. So the next one is, how important is scheduling and reviewing analytics for galleries and museums?
Okay, yeah. So the first question is scheduling.
Yeah, how?
Okay, so I guess it depends what level of engagement and time you have. If you're quite a small organization, analyzing those analytics and trying to get everyone at the right time, at the right day, I would say is less important if you're speaking to a smaller group of people. And I think that's added pressure if you're like, oh, someone's got to wake up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday to do this. So I would say just post organically. You don't have to look at analytics all the time. Maybe just put aside 10 minutes, once a month, just for curiosity. If you're a bigger organization and you're trying to really attract certain people and convert that to visitation, analytics can be really powerful. And I think a lot of times we post, but we don't actually take the time. You've put all the effort into the post and you hit publish and you're like, oh, good, I can move on to the next thing. But actually taking time to go through our analytics can be really powerful. It can be quite surprising what people find interesting. Say you're sharing certain collection objects or collection items or insights. You don't actually know what people might engage with the most. So I think analytics is highly worthwhile spending some time and having a read. Scheduling depends how much time you have to commit. I personally really enjoy scheduling because it means you can set them up throughout the week and then forget about it. It just automatically does it. So it can be quite time saving, I would say, is the best part of scheduling.
All right, great. So another question we have, and I guess we have to remember that, everybody's resources are very different. And so this question is, what if your museum or society doesn't have an internet facility? Can you function these days without it? That's a
tricky
question.
for social media.
Yeah, but
yeah, okay. That's quite tricky. If there is no internet, social media would be quite hard. Yes, if there's no internet, I guess social media can't actually run. That would probably be a bigger thing to engage. I'm just trying to think how to do that. I think it would be worthwhile investigating in internet connection if possible, because in addition to social media, there are a lot of other ways, such as even just having your own website or even getting listed on the Museums and Galleries of New South Wales website, so that you do have some kind of digital presence.
Perhaps I can just jump in there too and let people know there is a way that you can separate an organisational account from a personal account for most of these platforms. and access them both. But obviously that is something, and it is a really tough thing if you don't have that, if you're using your personal connections rather than your organizational connections. But there are also grants out there available for things like that. So certainly I know that some of our museums team could potentially point you in the right direction for that.
Yeah.
Jumping around a little bit again, and we will, I'm aware that we've just hit 3 o'clock. We might just do 5 more minutes of questions and then we'll finish up, if that's all right there.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I've got to click the ones that I've done. Can you quickly explain the key differences in the audience and purpose between the community versus storytelling social platforms? So I guess that's where you separated them into.
Separated them.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Right. So when we say community, maybe another way to look at it would be information, informative. So when you think of Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, they do have an element of interactivity, but they are primarily most useful for getting your information out there, such as for Facebook, if you want someone to know your opening hours, your location, those kinds of things, or linking to articles that are text-based that you can do on LinkedIn or Twitter, which is very short and sharp. Whereas, sorry, getting a bit tongue-tied, when you look at Instagram or YouTube or TikTok, people are looking for how you've not just taken that information, but how you've done something creative with it. So an interesting case study would be Instagram Reels, which is kind of mimicking TikTok. That's not just about saying, here's a photo of a new exhibition I have, come and have a look. It's about setting it to music, showing it with an interesting effect, having transitions. It's very much more about showing or conveying information in a playful or interesting way. Instagram also has stories. It's not just about saying, here are opening times, come along, which you might do in like a Facebook update. Instagram more lends itself to, can you show it in beautiful colors? Can you put some GIFs to make it interactive? There's a lot more consideration that needs to be taken for how you creatively present something. And that's quite different to how you would present, say, on LinkedIn. It means that different people will be attracted to each one. So for example, you know, people might not be scrolling Facebook looking for different museums to go to because we're in lockdown now, but people might be scrolling through different IGTV videos that people are sharing or organizations are sharing on Instagram. I guess Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok are trying to focus in and endear themselves to that creativity, to that visual stimulation, more so than the community-based, or I should also say like information-based platforms.
I think
we'll go more into it in our next workshops too.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to jump in here. I'm actually going to answer one. Well, I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to address one very quickly. We had a question about the rules of publishing images of artwork that you don't own. And so first off, we do actually have some resources in the M&G website, I believe, about this, but also Arts Law has really comprehensive explanation of copyright. But the general rule is, particularly if it's a creative work, like an artwork, don't share it unless you have permission. That's the general rule. And where you can, credit as best as possible. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Van. The question is much more broad reaching and we don't have time to answer the full thing today, but.
Yes, I think, you know, if you're a museum and gallery and you would be to share that artwork or image in your actual gallery, how would you credit them, or would you take it and simply put in your gallery? You can think of it like that. And my guess is most of you wouldn't, unless you had some kind of credit or some kind of agreement. Yes, there's different ways around it. For example, like on Instagram, if there is a post, you can repost things with credit, but I would, just as a broad rule, make sure you're crediting or seeking permission the same way you would want to if you were in a museum or gallery space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, generally, people are aware that this is a medium, and that, a lot of artists and things will grant permission, and exhibitions will have certain permissions. You can always check more directly, but there's a lot of resources that out there, and it is a very nuanced issue. So I encourage you to look into it further, or feel free to email me. And I guess we've probably got room maybe for one more. So I've got a question. Would you consider Snapchat and Pinterest to be social media? And what are your thoughts on using either of these?
Absolutely, yes. I would consider Snapchat and Pinterest social media, because they are created with audiences in mind. I have not considered using Snapchat for museums or galleries, but I would think if you know that your audience is engaged on Snapchat, go for it. I think Snapchat and Instagram stories, those two formats which disappear after 24 hours, are definitely useful for short updates, things like got a program on today, or deadlines for an internship are closing soon. They can create a real sense of urgency. So by all means, if your audience is on it, go for it. Pinterest is a little bit different because it is more of a niche, but it can be really powerful if, for example, you have collection objects that would speak to people interested in certain research or processes. Sharing those could really tap into a niche. So it just depends on your audience and what you think they would enjoy. All of these are free. So if you have the interest and time, there's no harm in setting up a Pinterest or a Snapchat and doing a couple things and seeing how they go. So yes, that was a great question.
Great. Well, look, we do have some more questions, but I think we're probably out of time. So what I might try and do is make a bit of a record of those, and look to try and include them in our future resources as well. But I just wanted to thank Vanessa for her wonderful presentation. It was absolutely great. And I will share that poll now for people who are still having a look. So I'll just put that in. But yeah, thank you so much, Vanessa. That was great.
Thank you. And it's exciting. And I can't wait to follow all your social media activities now.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for attending. It was great to have such a engaged audience.